Hello and welcome back to The Secret Knowledge. My name is Shane.
And I'm Allyson.
And today we are talking about episode 6 of Gaia's Disclosure series starring Dr. Stephen Greer and I always want to say Billy Graham, but Mr. Billy Carson.
I don't know that comparison is fully unapt, though. I think there are definitely some similarities.
I do think Billy Graham has left us, I'm pretty sure, right? He passed away.
Yeah, he was looking pretty crunchy.
Well, I will say the one thing that could make the show even better is if they pulled up a third chair.
And there's Billy Graham to weigh in.
To give us a religious perspective. But this episode was called Consciousness, CE5 Contact, and the Cosmos.
And a lot of good alliteration there.
A lot of good alliteration, a lot of words in this episode. Actually, I'd like to start a discussion of this episode with a bit of a game.
Okay.
You are in the hot seat. You're
Okay.
going to play. I don't have a name for it yet, but it's inspired by Stephen Greer and his abundant vocabulary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read you 6 terms. 5 of them are real, things Steve has talked about. 1 of them is false.
Ooh, okay.
And you have to pick which one is the false one.
All right.
I will give you short definitions with each one. I would advise not to try to read my facial expressions too much because a lot of these are going to make me laugh, and it doesn't mean they're real or fake. It just means Stephen has quite a way with words. So, the first one I will say to you is quantum energy vacuum generation system. This is an energy production system. That's really all I'm giving you for that one. The next one is the twin ships, a sighting by Stephen Greer of twin spaceships that appeared at the exact same point, right next to one another. The third one is 0 point energy, the lowest possible energy of a quantum system. Another one is Tillerman's Crest, the location of a CE5 retreat where the twin ships were spotted. A nanotubule. This is all I could really learn. A tube made of carbon, or who knows? Maybe I made the definition up. Sorry, it was only 5 things. So, and I can repeat the
Okay.
names if you'd like me to.
So right off the bat, I know to eliminate 0 point energy, whatever, because of the 0 point energy weapons of the previous episode.
Good memory.
So
Good memory.
that one's out.
Mm-hmm.
The word nanotubule struck out to me pretty specifically in this episode. So I know that one is as real as words spoken aloud can be.
Would you like to be reminded of the 3 remaining terms?
Yes.
It's hard to say without laughing. Quantum energy vacuum generational system, the twin ships, Tillerman's Crest.
Okay, I'm going to say Tillerman's Crest is real.
Okay.
Because I don't see you making up a place
Right.
for this little activity.
Yeah.
So now we're down to twin ships or gravitational vacuum.
Quantum energy vacuum generational system, or the twin ships sighting.
I'm going to say twin ships is real and you made up quantum vacuums.
Would you like to know?
Yes.
So the fake term was actually Tillerman's Crest. So I borrowed that expression from a kind of probably a video that in a way is parodying Stephen Greer. I'm sure people listening to this have seen it. If you've ever seen the Tim and Eric space video, Tim and Eric dress up in black turtlenecks and just say bullshit about space that isn't real. And there's one part where it's on Tim Heidecker, and he goes, "I like to look up at the stars, and I look at Tillerman's Crest, and it's just totally made up." So everything else: twin ships, quantum energy vacuum generational system, 0 point energy, and the nanotubule are all real terms.
Well, I think this was a great game. I can't believe you got one over on me. But it reminds me of a little game I've been planning to make myself, which is, and maybe I'll make it for this episode. I really want to make, but I have trouble endorsing this because this game would have to accompany the Gaia series that we're watching right now, which one I don't recommend people do. Don't watch the series. But more importantly, don't buy the series. So I don't really know how to promote this thing that I think would be fun while wrestling with the uselessness and futility I think that watching this series is. But I want to make a bingo game.
Oh.
Yeah. So if I can specifically endorse, after I make the bingo game, get the bingo, get drunk, steal this off of the internet through some sort of platform, and then I think that's a good time.
I'll sort of complete the whole package here. You said you want to have a game of, well, you said get drunk.
Yes.
I'm proposing I'll make a drinking game to also accompany the bingo
the
card.
bingo? Okay, so this is a multi-layered shit show.
So you can have, so really the thing that inspired all of this for me is that when we started this episode, I wrote just one thing at the top of my piece of paper, which was, here we go. I could tell just from the title, and this isn't me throwing shade from the get-go, by the way. This is just me speaking now as someone who's 6 episodes into this series. When I saw the title being about consciousness, CE5 contact, and the cosmos, I just knew there wasn't going to be much for me to learn here because it was going to be a lot to take in. At almost every turn of the episode, it's just too much. There's so much information that if I'm to take Stephen Greer at face value, I'm not now just accepting a man telling me about aliens. I'm accepting a man who's maybe the greatest scientist on the planet. His understanding knows no bounds. It goes across mathematics. It goes across psychology. It goes across how our brains work. It goes across every field of science you could possibly imagine. He has at least a passive understanding of. And or you know, as the episode would sort of have you think. And I was just overwhelmed, you know. I was pretty overwhelmed.
Yeah, I had a feeling this one was going to be a bit of a doozy by the title, and I want to pivot real quick just to say that our resistance to the themes in this episode are very Greer specific,
right?
Because I don't know where you're at, Shane, but like I want to believe.
You're now twice removed.
That's my current, and this changes basically on the daily, but that is where I'm currently at right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about consciousness. I'll get down on some CE5 potentially if Greer is not my leader in that.
Yeah.
But specifically because I had the feeling that we'd been spoiled by the last episode, by episodes 4 and 5,
right,
which were by and large coherent insofar that they stuck to a particular topic, a particular narrative thread, had something resembling a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Mm-hmm.
But when I thought back to episodes 2 and 3, which were, oh my God, just a linguistic rodeo.
Yeah.
I went into this sort of prepared for that.
Yeah.
So I had my pen out, I had my paper out, and I wasn't under the impression that this episode was necessarily going to be coherent. And because of that, I think I could literally follow it better because I wasn't having these periods of trying to make the things fit together that weren't going to work. I was just
right.
like, okay, well, that's a string of words.
It was interesting to see because like I didn't just want to make this whole episode be me kind of once again saying, look at all these things Stephen Greer is saying. What I actually kind of found interesting about this episode is that at least for Greer's terms, at least for what Greer is saying and sort of the shared language of Gaia.com, I think an enthusiast of Gaia would love this episode because any question they could have, Stephen answers in pretty in depth for what depth is for him. Actually, the first like 2 or 3 questions that Billy Carson asks are all like very similar. He's just like, how do our consciousness and technologies combine, and in what ways do those work? And It's about 15 minutes of Stephen Greer creating a mythos of how neurology and technology and holographic communication and interdimensional. I mean, it's like you said, it's a lot of words.
He doesn't like the word interdimensional, just for the record.
It's transdimensional.
It's transdimensional, which he states after explicitly saying he doesn't like the term interdimensional, and he's like, here's why. And then he gives the definition for interdimensional.
I thought that was really strange. I was like, but thank you for correcting me.
So he just wants you to use his word, essentially. Like, don't use the word that's already in the lexicon. I have rebranded this word, trademark Greer,
yes.
and you are now to say transdimensional.
I did like in this episode, this episode was where the money went. As far as I could tell, we had more graphics in this episode. We actually had documents that were mentioned, and they appeared on the screen for more than a second in a motion blur iMovie effect. We had, sorry, go on.
Well, I just wish, once again, I'm not rewatching the episode, but if I did, I would count how many 3D spinning brains there were, because there were at least 3. I would bet my life on 5.
Yeah.
But just swirling.
One of my favorite graphics used in this episode was just like a stock footage of a man and a woman like facing each other, like just stock photos. And then in between their heads was just like a weird nexus of rainbow consciousness energy. And I also want to say, and I promise this will be my last Tim and Eric reference of the episode, but when Stephen Greer talks about the future in this episode, it cuts 2 or 3 times to this like futuristic cityscape where everything's like silver green and like there's spaceships flying by. And it reminded me a lot of, there's this fake Tim and Eric medical show called Our Bodies. And in the show, Eric will sometimes ask questions like, doctor, in 30 or 40 years, if technology gets to this point, will my body be able to do this? And every time he says that cue of like in 30 or 40 years, it shows the cheesiest like futuristic sci-fi landscape where there's this like spaceship flying through or whatever. It just cracks me up. It looks almost identical to the Stephen Greer one. And I just have like a love of bad CGI. So anyway, that'll probably be my last Tim and Eric reference of the day. We'll see where things take us. But yeah, where should we really jump in to this episode?
I'm glad you gave, in some of your statements, kind of an overall summary of what the episode is about. But just to sum it up in a sentence, this episode is focused on the fact that our consciousness and the body can be used in conjunction with technology. And this is something that Greer is saying the aliens have figured out and squared away, and we as humans are only very barely touching the surface right now.
Yes, and I will say something Stephen Greer said, which I do think in a way is true. I don't know if it's true in the way he conceptualizes it, but he said for the next 1,000 years, one of the main things we're going to be looking at is the relationship between consciousness and technology. And I do think that's true. I mean, like VR,
sure.
Virtual reality, even augmented reality, like these are going to change how our minds interact with the world around us.
But that absolutely goes back to what you were saying a couple episodes ago, where one of Greer's rhetorical devices that he's constantly using is saying something that is generally agreeable, something that the average person might not request support for as his starting point, his jumping off point. But from there, we go into holograms, coherent thought sequencing, transmitted augmented technologies.
Yeah, and I always take a look at the comments before we watch these videos, just because I'll probably talk about this again. If I have a fascination with bad CGI, I also have a love of the internet comment system. My love of YouTube began when I saw a comment on a Salad Fingers video. And
Salad Fingers.
I immediately thought this is the greatest invention of all time. But I always look at the comments on these episodes before we watch them, and it's always interesting to me to see what people respond to on the Gaia platform. And there was one very long comment just praising Stephen Greer's ability to distill what consciousness is and how it interacts with the astral plane and like how it interacts with holographic technologies. And it's like, clearly, that's not for me. Like, I can't really connect with that comment, but for this content, I think it is singing. I mean, this series has a 99% approval rating on Gaia.
I just looked up unacknowledged on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's 75% strong.
And one of those percentage points is Demi Lovato, who is now the biggest Stephen Greer fan on the block. Another thing I wanted to mention, and I did not, or I have not looked in specifically into the RNG, or sorry, the random number generators experiments that Stephen Greer brings up in this video, but I have looked into similar experiments before. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what I learned about those. So in this episode, Stephen Greer mentions that this scientist set up a computer, something quantum mechanics, I don't know, and it's just throwing out random numbers, random combinations of ones and zeros. And when someone would walk into the room and focus their attention on the computer, they could manipulate or affect the outcome of the number input. He then says that if two people in love were in the room, it would even affect it even more.
Was this when the connecty graphic between people happened?
I actually don't think this was that one. I think that came up later for some. Maybe this was that one. Maybe this was. Again, I haven't looked into that specific scientist, but I did look into something. If you've ever used Facebook, you've probably seen this picture of snowflakes or ice patterns that were affected by someone playing certain music. So it'll show a pattern of water or something, and it'll say this was when it was listening to the Beatles, and it'll say this was when it was listening to two people argue, and like all this stuff. And I read into this experiment, and what I learned was the scientist who performed it was unwilling to reproduce the results, and he was unwilling to be observed. So I'm not saying that's exactly the same as the random number generation experiment, but the other time I'd heard something where like, look at these particles that can be affected by like the energy or the intent of a room, the scientist I looked into would refuse to do the experiment again.
Okay, so the water experiments that you're talking about in saying that you did some research on it and kind of immediately found out that the science was not what it was purported to be, that made me think of this period in the episode where they have a scientist, first name I can't remember, last name is Townsend, and he was doing those experiments on masslessness. And that totally reminded me of in Unacknowledged when Stephen Greer is purporting the water cars as viable technology. Mm-hmm. Just doesn't explain the science behind the technology, but it's like, we've proved this. The water, free energy exists. The water cars exist. Like that. As soon as we reach that part in the episode, I'm already going to have a problem with a person talking about a technology when I've known, at least in a couple of instances, he's said something outright and said that it works. And then we've looked into it and it's just, shifting sands.
Yeah.
There's also all that stuff coming out about David Wilcox and his free energy cars and patents that he's been trying to take donations for, which once again, we'll see, but I say that with big quotations. It doesn't sound like that's going to pan out.
Yeah, and I'm sure most people listening to this know this, and I know we've talked about this in this series before, but just because something is in a patent, it doesn't mean anything. You can have the most intricate figure and all little numbers written out on the side, and it still just costs $45 to register with the Library of Congress. Like, just because there's a patent that's showing on the screen and Stephen Greer is talking about it, it doesn't mean it's a real technology. I just saw I did have a sixth term. I was gonna throw New Earth Incubator at you. Yeah. So another idea I like a lot in this episode, and I've noticed this is kind of what I've distilled my interaction with this series down to now, is I just kind of try to see like, what are the things that I respond to? And as we pointed out before, this is our more casual series. So like, if anyone is listening to this is wondering like, why I'm kind of so passively being like, well, I haven't looked into this. We have more focused discussions on our TS Cast content. This is sort of we literally just watched the episode.
Right. So for the unacknowledged series, we watched the video several times. We took notes. We did some research. We came back to it. We just wanted to get some more experience under our belt.
Right. And I just wanted to throw that out there as I just say, like, this is just an idea that I like. But there's something that's always really resonated with me, that perhaps when there are sightings like a UAP or a UFO or a shape in the sky, that maybe it's not a spaceship. Like maybe that's the entity. Mm-hmm. This started because when I was a kid, I played a science fiction game called Earthbound, where the aliens would appear as like cubic shapes, and that would just be what they were, and that was like really mind-blowing to me. So there's a portion of this episode where Stephen Greer talks about this, and he's into it. He says that they can take on those forms. He says the ships or the crafts themselves are alive and are part of the construction, and that they can heal themselves. And I'm not telling you to necessarily believe that idea, but I'm just saying, that is an idea that fascinates me. If anyone knows, of intriguing cases of that and sort of the lore of UFOs, I would love for you to post a comment and tell me more about it. But I can't deny that when Steve starts talking about living shapes and the ET as the craft instead of the craft as the carrier of ETs, my interest is always piqued. I like that idea. It always kind of gets me going, and it's fun to listen to. Okay, so this was actually my highlight of the episode, I think. Maybe just for imagery alone. So I don't remember the exact name of the lab, but it flashed a Nokia sign on
Bell Labs
on the screen. So a few things. I'm going to lay out the story, and then I'm going to talk about the things that I liked about it.
Oh, yes. They procured a spherical alien device.
And so, yes. So what was the lab called? Sorry.
Bell Labs.
The Bell Labs people procured an ET device shaped like a soccer ball.
Which is to say, shaped in the exact formation of Kindness's, the alien's head.
Oh, yeah. Perfect circle. I don't know if it was described this way in the episode, but at least the image they showed on screen was a metallic ball. It almost looked like a disco ball with a lot of little lights coming out of it, which I just thought was kind of fun. And they were able to, as they were studying this ball, I think for its communication properties, it started to telepathically communicate with them.
Yes, with the scientist saying, "Please destroy me," or probably more accurate, like a "Please destroy me."
Destroy me. Well, so actually, when it was just with the scientists, it was okay. It was not until a general became involved that the ball asked them to kill it. And do you remember how they killed it?
Did they use microwave technology?
They microwaved it, is what Stephen Greer says, and destroyed it. So they killed the soccer ball by microwaving it. A few things in the story stuck out to me as a little bit strange, as many Stephen Greer stories do. But this was one of the only times where we're going to go down door number one and say that the story is false. And Stephen Greer knows. This is one of the only times I think he almost had an out-of-body moment and realized the absurdity of what he was saying. Because if you recall, he stopped for a moment and he goes, well, this is a true story.
I do remember that.
He like reassured Billy that it was true. And, I'm not going to say that I'm sort of some kind of mentalist who can like pick up on all these things about people.
You were genuinely better at spotting the shyster than I am. Like you had your keen eye on Doty well before I did.
I don't know what it is, but sometimes just the way someone speaks just switches something in my head where I just like don't trust them now. I can't really put it into words yet. I've not like thought about it enough, but
yeah, I don't necessarily think that I have that.
And Greer, when he said that this is a true story, I just like saw this look in his eye where I think for that moment he was like, wow, this just isn't true. Like, But that's door number one where the story's not true. Okay, that could just be my sensibility. What was interesting to me is he just went for it. These people found a soccer ball shaped alien device that started talking to them, and they microwaved it. It's 30 seconds of the episode and we move on. I mean, what did you make of this story?
Well, that, like you said in the last episode about kindness, this is an event that is so fantastical, so absurd, so in need of its own proof that it makes absolutely no sense how quickly we get past it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll talk about this for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm game. And I understand that one could say that that's not the purpose of the Gaia series. However, could this not have been a larger event for one of his many, 5 documentaries or whatever it is? I
guess just for something that is, true, according to Stephen Greer, there was just so much of this story that even more so than usual, I found myself, not that I'm going to get it, but kind of wanting more. So we have step 1. They procure the device. How? Where did it come from? When? They started to study it. How? What were they studying it for? Did they fuck with it? Did they use it ever to successful ends? How long did that happen? Mm-hmm. The general comes in. What general?
How to hear about it?
Of what branch of the military?
Does he just pop into Bell Labs to make sure that they're not dicking around with anything important like every 6 weeks?
Did he change the direction of their research? When it starts to communicate with them, did it communicate with all of them? Did they hear a voice in their head, or was it an inclination? It seemed like an inclination they couldn't resist because they did destroy it. Anyway, again, I know we're not getting these from Greer, and I'm not saying that's my problem with the story. I'm just saying more than other stories, I was like, man, there's just so much here.
But I think that's another good question, which is, who is this enough for? And for the individual that story portrayed in that manner by Greer specifically, what do we do with that? I mean, I'm not out there to yuck anyone's yum. I don't want to have this Greer project to discount any of the numerous experiencer stories or paranormal phenomenons that people have encountered, or all of the many scientists and military personnel, etc., that claim to have proof related to this topic. My issue is very Greer specific in that we need to turn him out of the discourse. And I don't know how you do that with anyone, being that media and the way information is disseminated is just so screwed up right now, probably forever, but it seems to get worse and worse and worse and more entangled the more complex the information technologies become. So I don't know how we find a way to come to an agreement that we need to get this person's volume turned down to the point that they can't be leading people knowingly astray. But that's what the value of having this type of conversation is for me. We found one. He's making shit up, or if he's not making shit up, he's doing nothing to present the information in a way that is reasonable. So I don't know what we do to that, and I don't know how we reach the person that just is okay with this being enough information for them.
Yeah, and it's also possible that perhaps to the Gaia community that is watching a lot of other shows on this platform, maybe there's the soccer ball alien movie on here that I've just never watched. Right. You know what I mean? Greer could be contributing to this alternative mythos. You know what I mean? Or perhaps we've acknowledged that you and I are kind of new kids on the block with a lot of what's out there. So maybe even someone listening to this right now is saying, yeah, Greer sucks, but let me hit you with this cool soccer ball story. Maybe it is something I just haven't heard of.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And I'll even call back to our last episode when I think justifyingly so we were poking fun at Greer's use of the term 0-point directional energy weapons. But Yeah, like coming out of Greer's mouth, like I can't stand for it. But that did lead me on kind of a wild goose chase in the coming days after that, of finding at least a number of people who believe that UAP technologies that believe that they have come into contact with them have gotten sick.
And I will say too, I don't know if this is a point to Greer, but it's at least kind of in the for me, something about how we started having these types of conversations is like, I'm not going to get into the full origins of The Secret Knowledge today as a title. I think that'll be something that kind of unravels over time. But a lot of this fascination began for us as like, we wanted to kind of investigate the fringes of things where we were acknowledging there was going to be some kooky stuff that was maybe not fully of the mainstream, but perhaps there was something to learn there. And while we've definitely learned, like you said, Greer is someone whose mic we want to turn down, we wouldn't be having this conversation if we weren't people willing to kind of get a little mucky and, you know, to be on episode 6 of a Gaia series. That really is like one of the core values of The Secret Knowledge as a project.
And if I somehow existed in a reality where I had not experienced Unacknowledged and his other documentaries, and I arrive at having a Gaia subscription and I watch these documentaries with no other context for Greer other than what is in front of me, I can see myself kooking out and like having a good time and wanting to look into this stuff a little more. And I think that's because he's drawing on a lot of the tropes isn't quite the right word, but the stuff that's happening in the UFO disclosure community right now. So that is to say that I think we can poke fun at Greer in his I beat cancer and Sherry didn't sort of episode in the last part of the series, and still say, but we're not ruling out that there could be some veracity to other people's claims on the subject.
Again, this isn't me trying to take a cheap blow at Greer. I really didn't understand most of this episode. Almost every time Billy Carson asked a question, Carson, I thought I said Graham again. Almost every time Billy asked a question, I didn't understand what the hell happened next. And that's just true. I rarely followed what the hell was going on in this. It was too much.
Well, and I think that goes back to an overall issue with the series, which is the person in the seat as a journalist is not functioning as a journalist.
Right.
They're functioning as just a sounding board for Greer to spout his Greerism. So I think it makes sense that we're not sensing any sort of chemistry in between the two individuals, because there is no sender and receiver, receive, send. It's just one track. It's from Billy to Greer, but I also maintain that Greer doesn't really need Billy.
Yeah. Well, and what did you say at the end of the episode?
Oh my gosh, poor Billy. He looks so sad. A husk of a man, just glazed over, impotent, pointless. Why am I here? Billy, I don't know why you're here.
Billy's got the type of face in this series where, like, you know, when I talk to you, my eyebrows move, my eyes kind of move, my face moves.
A little bit there in like episodes 1 or 2, but here we are in episode 6, and Billy has left the building.
We got a dead face on Billy. Not much of an interviewer, not much of a philanthropist either, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. So one of my final thoughts about this episode, I understand this might be a little nebulous.
This is the space for it.
Yeah,
Nothing needs to be tethered here.
This is
if we're operating on Greer's and Billy's rules.
So this is going to be kind of a leap. When I was in high school, late in high school, a classmate of mine got involved in a pyramid scheme, and he would post videos on Facebook.
In high school?
In high school, like senior year. This was also someone who in her junior year, by the way, actually gave money to one of those Nigerian prince emails.
No way.
Yeah. I'm not going to name him because, yeah. this was a very self-serious person who, even while he was doing the email with the Nigerian prince, he would come into school each day and we would try to tell him, I'm just going to call him Tom, would be like, Tom, this is a scam. Like, don't do this. This is the oldest scam in like internet history. He'd be like, you guys don't fucking get it. Like, this one's different. This one's different. Like, this is going to be blah, blah, blah. Very, very self-serious guy. You couldn't really make fun of him. Like, you couldn't even jokingly kind of try to tease him. He just was a very self-serious person. And everyone's different. Everyone's different sensitivity level. So I'm not saying that means he's a bad guy. But when we were seniors in high school, he got involved in one of the energy drink pyramid schemes. And he would post these videos to Facebook, and it would say, like, my boss arriving on the job, like, hashtag, like, you know, entrepreneur, like, hashtag grind set. Like, I don't think grind set was the term back then, but, and it would be videos of his boss, some scamming guy, arriving places in a helicopter and like hyping everybody up with a megaphone and like throwing out energy drinks. And when you would talk to Tom about it, it was always so serious to him. He was like, no, I'm learning sales. I'm doing this, this, and this. Like, you know, just kind of in the bullshit of a pyramid scheme. And I understand this is going to be a long link, but it's almost like a fiction that Tom was making for himself of how real these things were. And I really got a sense for that today with the dynamic between Billy and Steve. And I know, again, this is a bit of a leap, but when you said like Billy Carson was looking more dead than ever, I really felt like there was a resignation to the fiction today from both of them. Like I said, even Stephen Greer stopped himself and reassured maybe himself this is a true story, right? And that was just a vibe I got from this episode, that almost like the jig was up a little bit for everyone. And all I can say is that same sort of self-conscious, self-serious, this is real, this is real, this is real. I really just got that feeling from this particular episode in a way I haven't really gotten from the previous ones, even though they've been just as full of BS. So I know that was a bit of a tangent, but that's just how I felt watching it.
Yeah, I think so. If my first question for having this series is something along the lines of how do we get to a place where we collectively turn down the volume on Greer, my secondary, less important question is, how much actually on the sauce are people like Greer and like Billy Carson? Like, how aware of the fictions that they are telling are they? And clearly that's unknowable. We would have to be inside their brains, but
we'd have to know they were being honest.
Yeah, so. It's unanswerable, but I can't stop myself from wondering, like, what is going on with the types of people that are building their whole lives around these sort of things and are obvious shysters. I mean, it's different when someone is just clearly mentally ill, or it's different if it's just an unproven story that we can't figure out if it's true or false because it's just simply a personal experience.
Right.
But when it's so big, when it makes up so much of their lives and their financial security, I'm just baffled by the amount of these types of people that seem to exist and what feels like a futility of ferreting them out. Like, I don't see in the next 5 to 10 years Billy or Stephen their platforms getting smaller. I truly believe in like 10 years they're just going to be wealthier with more content, with more followers, and that's so sad.
Yeah, you know, while you were saying that just now, it did kind of strike me like maybe we just underestimate money, you know, for these people. Like, as you were talking, the Pink Floyd song Money was just playing in my head, and I just like heard the lyrics, like the very cynical lyrics of that song, and I was like, you know what, maybe it's that simple.
In which case it does make sense to us that could be the motivating factor, but wow.
Yeah, kind of a dour note to end on, but you know, sometimes the secret knowledge, sometimes the truth hurts, is maybe the tagline for the secret knowledge. Well, do you have anything else you want to add to this one?
That's gonna cut it for me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, everyone.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. I mean, I think if you've made it this far in this episode, let's just address it. Clearly, Shane and I are still kind of finding our sea legs. Like, we are still learning. We're still kind of figuring out how to put this podcast together, but we're having a lot of fun. I think these are conversations worth having. I think one of my main motivating factors is I just want to find the other people out there that want to have similar conversations,
Right.
and possibly have found other information that I haven't been exposed to yet in regard to not even just specifically Stephen Greer, but this whole, I'm going to rebrand the word phenomenon, but this phenomenon of people exploiting specifically the UFO community to their own financial or power ends. So thanks for coming along, and thanks for giving us a chance, and we hope to get better and improve, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming along. And if you do know anything about the alien soccer ball, if that is a true story and Greer just misrepresented it, please let me know.
Yeah, drop a hot link.
Please drop me a link to the soccer ball. Final thought is that we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, most podcast places. You can also follow us on Twitter, like or dislike this video, and please subscribe if you've made it this far.
Hit the notification bell.
I think that's everything. Board the spaceship. Okay, we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Bye.